Hi everyone. So with this video, it will not be near as good as the Michael Wood documentary, but I do hope it would help you out with some of the materials that we're going through this week and throughout the writing assignments for this semester. So I want to take a minute and start with the writing assignments. And I want you to think about two specific questions as you're writing here. So as I was reading through those first week assignments, one of the things that I noticed was there's a lot of summary and paraphrase of the events of the story. That's not a problem. That'll actually help, but they need to have a purpose for them. So what I want you to do is think about why. Why is this information important? Why do you think you need to include it in your analysis? And then you can explain how the author got there. So think about it as a way of approaching one specific idea. So in several of your assignments, and this is completely normal in early semester writing and also in writing in general, is that you're working through an analysis, you're bringing in some points, you have different ideas, and at the end, when you go to close out everything, you find that's the point that I was looking for, and it brings all of the things that have been done so far into context, the things that you were working on before. When that happens, take what happens at the bottom, move it to the top, and then revise your essay to prove that central point. That is the S of the SEAL method. And you see the link online, which was actually done by one of the professors, Robert Evans at AUM, where this is the state your argument point. If you're writing and you find that argument at the end, flip it over, put that argument at the top. Then you can illustrate your point with the examples from the text and explain how these illustrations support this overall point. So think in terms of why and how. It's not just what, you've got to move beyond that. That said, don't necessarily withhold some of that summary information. Just focus on making sure that you're answering these questions here in terms of what you're supposed to be doing with the information, even maybe taking it one step first and thinking it further and thinking about the text rhetorically, which means thinking about why the author would have constructed it in this way. So in something like The Dream of the Rood, is that a devotional text? Is that something, is the writer trying to inspire devotion? Often that can get you going with that next step of that literary analysis. That is the type of work that we're going to be doing throughout the semester. So you'll notice that as you read through my comments on your posts, you'll see me mentioning these questions. Why? Why? Why is this important? Why do you think it's important? Why do you think the author thinks that it's important? And then how does the information you've provided in your post support that overall argument you're going to make? So use this as a way to work through it. Read my comments, they'll point you in that direction. Okay, so there's 5 key topics that we're going to think about with the second part of Beowulf. Now, Beowulf, we've seen him destroy Grendel, we've seen him destroy Grendel's mother, and this second part of the story is when he returns home, and there's this sort of big passage of time that happens when Beowulf eventually becomes king, and then meets his demise at the hands of a dragon. So there are a few things that I want you to keep an eye on as you're reading through this. One, continuing that discussion from last week of the warrior and the knight. In this case, the knight is a anachronistic term, which means that we're kind of using modern terminology to write back over the past. This term comes up later. Right now we're thinking about warrior, but we want to think about that relationship that the warrior has with his king. Notice how Beowulf gives his gifts back to his king, and there's that relationship of the king expects the warriors to return honor and glory, and the warriors can also expect that the king would give to them gold and other things that we talked about with Hrothgar last week. So we see Beowulf step into that role as the king. How does he treat his people? And we don't see much of his reign except for the very end as he's heading into the battle with the dragon and what his goals are. And we kind of see him to that end and what he's supposed to be doing and protecting his people from the dragon, but also going to gather wealth for his kingdom. And this has one of my favorite parts of the poem when Beowulf is about to die. He says this beautiful line, "Fate has swept away all of my kinsmen, earls in their courage to their final destiny. I must follow them. And so you kind of have this beautiful, peaceful moment of Beowulf moving on to that next step, following that same path that others have traveled before him. So I want to see how you think about him fulfilling this role as queen. Now there's an interesting contrast in this between Queen Hygd and a previous queen, Modrith, and how they compare how the queens are supposed to act. And in general, the queen is expected to show the same level of generosity and openness with the people that the king is. And so they operate together in that way. So look at those comparisons. I'm interested to see what you think about that. Now, if you haven't seen the Hobbit movies or read the Hobbit book, one of the movies that you can look at is the second of that series, The Desolation of Smaug, and the third one really. And the thinking about the dragon as this new enemy. The dragon is different than Grendel and Grendel's mother in terms of the offense he's trying to right. Dragons in this era are hoarders. They have gold that they gather together, and they don't do anything with it. They just become corrupt and selfish. And you think about the application of that, of what's the point of gathering all this money if you're not going to use it? Think about what the king is supposed to do with the money. He's supposed to give it out, give out those riches and treasures to his people. Well, Smaug isn't doing that. He is holding on to it. He's hoarding it. And in the second Hobbit movie, in the third movie, they talk about the dragon sickness, that selfishness that comes over people. It's a topic that's important for Tolkien. He wrote a poem and basically wrapped the idea of Smaug around this whole presentation of dragons. And so if you want a good representation of that, take a look. Not anything you have to do or what we're talking about, but I think it's a fair understanding of what this is representing in terms of what gold does to people and the type of character it's there. So selfishness, hoarding, keeping things to myself versus the willingness to give it out to people. And then finally, if you look at page 132, you'll see a list of extended wars between the people. And even the poem itself admits that once Beowulf's gone, we're probably all going to end up back at war again. So this is not a time where war creates this lasting peace, that it's upheavaled again. And that connects back to that earlier discussion we've had last week about the Were Guild, and you have to buy, each life is worth a certain amount, and if you kill somebody, they have to exchange that amount, and it can often go back and forth with revenge. And so it's not necessarily a feudal view. It does recommend to us, though, that war is a part of life, unfortunately, and the losses and other things, and that is a part of who we are, and that's not going anywhere anytime soon. So what do we do with the time? We do the best we can given the circumstances we have. If that means that our nation, in this case in Beowulf's nation, goes to war, then that's what they do. If they have peace, that's what they do. The whole point is to stay in this idea of being the warrior and the knight and honoring the king. So I'm interested to see how you unpack this throughout this week. In the discussion board posts, put these things into practice, and we'll see you next week.